June 12, 1944. 0435 hours. Northern outskirts of Ortona, Italy. The ruined city sat under a low gray sky, its alleys clogged with collapsed masonry, broken roof tiles, and dust that hung in the air like a constant haze. The narrow streets forced every engagement into close quarters. Firing lanes were short. Artillery support was limited by the dense urban layout. Every corner held danger. Every shattered house could hide a machine gun or sniper. The city killed men faster than open fields, not through range but through concealment and surprise. Private Arthur Miller moved along a jagged interior wall inside a 3-story residential block. He kept his hands on broken brick as he advanced. The structure still held, supported by internal pillars and a reinforced stairwell, but the front wall had been hit by 2 rounds earlier. Half the facade lay on the street. The house no longer offered dependable cover. Its firing ports, 2 large rectangular gaps made by combat engineers, drew constant fire. The enemy already knew where they were. Anyone leaning into those openings became a clear target. The pressure was rising. 2 squads had been cut down the previous day when they tried to use standard firing positions. These openings were built according to doctrine, but doctrine failed in a city like this. The enemy watched for silhouettes. A visible barrel meant instant counterfire. The German positions across the street had a strong vantage point over the larger ports. Their MG-42 teams held the angles. Anyone attempting to return fire lasted only seconds. Miller studied the wall again. He checked the spacing between bricks. His eyes tracked the ventilation pattern common in Italian urban housing. Thin vertical gaps, placed to help airflow, dotted many exterior walls. These vents had no tactical meaning to the army, but they were normal architectural features across the region. To Miller they were something else. They were concealment. They were camouflage built by civilians long before the war. He moved toward a section of wall still intact. The bricks here were uniform. Mortar lines were solid. He tapped the pattern lightly. He found the thin hollow space where a vent should exist if the wall followed typical civilian planning. The idea was simple. He wanted a small, concealed hole that looked like a normal architectural vent from the outside but gave a soldier a firing line from inside. It needed to be narrow. It needed to match the pattern. It needed to hide the shape of a rifle barrel completely. His squad leader entered the room. Sergeant Douglas Hale kept his voice low as he scanned outside. He had seen enough men carried out in the last 24 hours to distrust every opening in the structure. "You see anything useful, Miller?" Hale asked without moving toward the broken facade. "Yes. A way to fire without giving our position away." Miller kept his tone even. He had proposed the idea 2 nights earlier. Officers dismissed it. They called it untested. They said it was too small for a firing lane. They wanted wider fields of fire, not tiny gaps. They followed the book. The book did not fit Ortona. Hale walked closer. "The captain thinks we hold until reinforcements reach the east alley. We need lines that won't get men killed." Miller pointed at the brick pattern. "This section looks like a vented layout. Italian builders use them in older homes. If I remove 1 brick and shape it right, it will look like the vent it replaced. You will not see a muzzle. You will not see movement. The enemy will not identify it." Hale looked over the wall. He studied the position across the street. The Germans held the 2nd floor of a hotel. Their angles dominated the approach. The squad had been pinned all morning. Standard ports exposed every man who used them. Hale needed something different. "You are certain it will blend in?" he asked. "Yes. They expect large firing ports. They ignore vents because every building has them." Miller inspected the corner. "I can set 3 in under an hour. Each one controlled. Each one hidden." Hale waited in silence. He heard the distant rattle of an MG-42 further south. He heard the rumble of armor on a distant street. He weighed the risk. The last 2 squads suffered 8 casualties trying to use recommended openings. Something had to change. "Do it," Hale said. Miller went to work. He retrieved a small hammer and chisel from an engineer kit. He worked with steady control. He removed only the selected brick, leaving the surrounding structure untouched. The hole he created was small. It matched the dimensions of the civilian vent pattern. He cleaned the edges to maintain the illusion. From outside nothing looked unusual. It resembled every other vent on the block. Miller repeated the process twice more. He placed 1 hole overlooking the main street. Another targeted the corner where enemy infantry crossed toward a supply point. The 3rd covered an alley that connected to the hotel entrance. Each hole provided a narrow, specific lane. There was no wide arc. These were precision positions. He briefed the squad. They formed a rotation. One rifleman per hole. No unnecessary movement. No leaning. No full silhouette. Only controlled shots. The idea felt unusual to some. Smaller ports seemed counterintuitive. Soldiers were used to larger openings. Larger openings offered comfort and visibility. These vent holes offered survival. The first enemy movement came at 0610 hours. A German platoon advanced through the debris-filled street. Their formation was tight. They had not identified any firing lanes because the large ports were abandoned. Their assumption was simple. They saw no rifles. They saw no barrels. They believed the position was suppressed. Hale kept his squad silent. He signaled Miller. Miller signaled the rifleman at the first hole. The first shot broke the quiet. A clean single round. It struck the lead soldier in the collarbone. He collapsed instantly. The enemy scattered but could not pinpoint the source. They scanned the obvious openings. They fired at the large ports. Dust and brick chips exploded from those areas. The vent holes stayed invisible. Miller moved to the second hole. He signaled again. Another shot. The Germans reacted with confusion. They aimed at windows. They aimed at shadows. They never saw a barrel. They never saw movement. The squad began a controlled firing sequence. Each vent hole delivered precise shots. The Germans fell back toward the hotel but took losses with every step. Their platoon broke cohesion within moments. Their machine gun team attempted to set up a counterfire position but collapsed under 3 rapid hits from the vent positions. The effect was immediate. The building remained silent except for the controlled shots. The enemy never identified the shooters. Within minutes, the street was clear. Hale looked at the wall. He looked at Miller. He understood the value. Something small had changed everything. The squad held their fire once the street emptied. Hale waited for several minutes before speaking. He watched the opposite building for movement. No shadows crossed the broken windows. No rifles appeared. The enemy had retreated to reorganize. Their shock was clear from the speed of their withdrawal. They had not expected casualties from unseen positions. This was the first engagement all week where the squad survived without losing a man. Hale turned to Miller. They could not find a single muzzle flash, Hale said. His voice held a mix of relief and calculation. He knew the battle was far from over, but he also knew they had gained a small advantage. We hold this for as long as the line needs. Miller nodded. He inspected the holes again. The edges looked natural. The color of the brick matched. The surface showed no signs of tampering. He checked the angles to confirm the lanes were still viable. He reinforced the mortar around the remaining bricks to ensure stability. Precision mattered. A weak joint could compromise the next volley. The squad resupplied ammunition. They redistributed water. They prepared for another assault. The building carried an eerie quiet. Dust drifted from ceiling cracks. Footsteps from other rooms echoed slightly. Each man stayed close to his assigned vent hole. They did not discuss the earlier success. They stayed focused. At 0730 hours, intelligence from a neighboring platoon came through. The enemy was preparing a counter-assault. Their scouts had reached the hotel. Their movement was fast and organized. They likely intended to retake the block before Allied reinforcements arrived from the east. This meant another engagement was inevitable. Hale reviewed the situation with Miller. The buildings surrounding their position were compromised. Many had structural failures. The hotel across the street remained intact enough to support 2 floors of firing teams. The route the Germans used earlier was still their most direct path. They would try again. They would search for firing ports. They would expect the squad to use standard positions. They would aim at them immediately. Miller analyzed the pattern of enemy response. They fired at every standard port on site, but they ignored the brick vents. He understood why. Vents existed in every second building along the block. They appeared in rows. They never varied in size. They were as common as windows. Soldiers ignored them because civilians built them. Doctrine never classified vents as tactical features. The next attack began when the sun rose above the rooftops. Light cut through the dust. The street filled with long shadows. The Germans advanced with a stronger formation this time. Their lead elements stayed behind cover. Their machine gun teams scanned from the hotel windows. Their spacing was wider. They paused often to check angles. Hale kept the squad silent. He waited for the Germans to commit. They had to reach the kill zone before the squad fired again. Timing and discipline would determine the outcome. Early fire would give the enemy a chance to retreat and regroup. The squad needed them exposed. Miller studied their approach. The enemy moved differently than earlier. They were sensing a hidden threat but did not know where to direct their attention. They checked windows. They checked doors. They checked the large damaged ports. None of them saw anything behind the vent bricks. At 0812 hours, the first German rifleman stepped into the lane of the left vent. Hale gave a single signal. The rifleman at the vent fired one round. The enemy soldier collapsed instantly. The shot traveled through the narrow gap with no visible flash. From the street, it looked like the bullet came from nowhere. The German formation reacted with force. Machine guns from the hotel opened fire in wide arcs. They targeted the larger ports again. Their rounds struck shattered facades and concrete pillars. They created dust clouds. They hammered every obvious angle. Miller shifted his position. He moved to the second vent. He signaled the next rifleman. Another controlled shot. Another enemy down. The Germans returned fire wildly. They fired at shadows and broken windows. They avoided the vents entirely. They did not trust them. They believed the threat came from higher floors or the adjacent building. The firing sequence continued. Each vent produced one or two shots. Then silence. Then a new vent. The enemy could not triangulate the fire. The sound bounced inside the building and distorted the source. They expected muzzle blast. The vent holes concealed it. They expected barrel movement. The vent holes eliminated it. They expected wide arcs. The vents gave narrow precision. A German machine gun team tried to set up near a crushed cart for partial cover. Miller observed them and adjusted the angle of the third vent. He signaled. The rifleman delivered 3 rapid rounds. The gunner dropped first. The assistant gunner fell a second later. Their weapon never fired a shot. The street shifted quickly. The German formation fractured. They separated into smaller groups. Some tried to flank left. They found no openings. Others tried to fall back. They moved without coordination. A few attempted to return fire toward the general facade, but their shots hit empty space. Hale maintained command. "Hold discipline," he ordered. "No wasted rounds." He knew the Germans were panicking. The squad needed to maximize psychological impact. Unseen fire in an urban street caused fear quickly. Confusion spread faster than casualties. The squad continued firing only when targets entered a vent's narrow lane. Each shot was deliberate. Each hit carried precision. Within minutes, nearly half of the attacking force was down. The rest scattered into alleys. Miller watched their retreat. He tracked their movement patterns. They moved with hesitation. They checked every possible angle except the vents. They never looked at them. Their training did not prepare them for this type of deception. They did not see the threat because they did not recognize it. When the final German survivor disappeared behind a burned truck, Hale gave the order. "Cease fire." The street fell silent. Dust settled slowly. No voices came from across the road. The hotel windows remained empty. The enemy had withdrawn again. Hale approached Miller. "This position would have fallen without those holes," he said. He was not exaggerating. "We need more before the next wave." Miller nodded. He already had a plan. The building contained enough intact brick sections for at least 3 additional vents. He could construct them in the third-floor walls to add vertical coverage. He could place another one on the south corner to watch the adjoining alley. He could reinforce the internal mortar to maintain structural stability during heavy fire. Hale gathered the squad. "Resupply," he said. "Next wave hits harder. We give them nothing." Miller returned to his tools. He moved to the second floor's southern wall. He traced the pattern with his fingers. He tapped to find the hollow spaces. He marked the brick that matched the ventilation alignment. He began the work again. Miller worked quickly. Speed mattered, but precision mattered more. A poorly shaped vent hole would reveal itself under direct observation. An uneven edge or irregular mortar line could draw attention. The enemy did not need brilliance to detect a flaw. They needed only one reason to look twice. Miller ensured they never had that reason. He chipped the first brick loose with careful taps. He caught it before it fell. He checked the cavity behind it. The hollow space aligned with the building's natural ventilation channel. This made the disguise nearly perfect. He trimmed the opening with the chisel until it matched the exterior pattern. From outside, it would appear identical to the remaining vents. He finished the second vent on the third floor. This one covered the hotel's upper windows. Elevated fire offered a new advantage. The enemy would not expect hidden positions on multiple levels. Their counterfire earlier focused on the first floor. They assumed standard doctrine. They did not prepare for vertically distributed firing points. By 0930 hours, Miller had constructed 5 additional vents. The building now held 8 positions in total. Each covered a specific lane. Each offered concealment. Each matched civilian architecture so closely that even Allied engineers would have missed the modifications without close inspection. Hale inspected the interior. "These vents give us full street coverage," he said. He pointed to the northwest corner. "That one covers the church steps. That's where their second wave will stage." Miller confirmed. "They will use the hotel again, but they will push harder from the flank." The squad rotated into place. Each rifleman memorized his vent's field of view. They practiced minimal movement. They rehearsed switching from one vent to the next without exposing themselves in open space. The building became a controlled network of firing lanes. Outside, distant gunfire rolled across the district. Allied units were pushing from the east. Their progress was slow. The enemy wanted to hold Ortona as long as possible. Urban fighting favored defenders. Every meter cost casualties. Every room had to be cleared by hand. At 1012 hours, Hale heard the first indication of a new assault. The sound of boots scraping through debris traveled along the alley. The Germans moved with caution. They had suffered 2 failed attacks already. They would not approach blindly again. Hale positioned the squad in silence. Miller took a position near the 3rd-floor vent. He observed the street without leaning into the hole. He remained 2 steps back. Only the rifle barrel would align with the vent when needed. He used a small piece of broken mirror to study the angles. The Germans formed a staggered line behind rubble. Their lead scout carried field binoculars. He scanned the building's facade. His focus lingered on the large ports. He inspected each window. He watched for rifles. He never checked the vents. Hale whispered, "They still do not see them." Miller spoke softly. "They will not. They recognize the pattern. They trust their assumptions." The scout made a hand signal. His platoon spread out. 2 machine gun teams took positions near a crushed column. A designated marksman moved to the hotel's upper floor. Their formation was stronger than before. Their spacing reduced exposure. Their readiness was high. It did not matter. They still could not identify the true threat. At 1020 hours, the first German rifleman entered the kill lane of the 2nd-floor vent. Hale gave a single nod. The rifleman aligned and fired. The shot struck the target's ribcage. The soldier fell without producing a sound. The enemy response was immediate. Machine gun fire raked the entire facade. Dust exploded from broken walls. Plaster shattered. But every burst targeted the wrong places. They hammered the windows. They hammered the large ports. They hammered cracks and shadows. They never aimed at the vents. Miller shifted to the 3rd-floor vent. A machine gun assistant leaned out from behind the column. Miller signaled. The rifleman fired. The assistant dropped. The machine gunner ducked behind the column, unaware of the angle that exposed him. The squad rotated fire between vents. 1 shot from above. 1 from below. 1 from the corner. 1 from the left. The Germans tried to locate the shooters. They failed. They adjusted their fire again, but they chased shadows. The marksman in the hotel fired several rounds toward the building. His bullets hit the edges of broken windows. He never found a muzzle flash. He could not triangulate the sound. He fired until his magazine emptied, then shifted to another window. Miller tracked him through the 3rd-floor vent. The marksman's head briefly entered the firing lane. Miller signaled. A rifleman took the shot. The marksman fell backward into the room, his body disappearing from view. The Germans lost their overwatch. Their platoon began to fracture again. They attempted to shift into the alley, but the vent on the 1st floor covered that angle. A single shot dropped the first soldier who tried. Another stepped in. Another fell. Hale kept discipline tight. Short bursts only. Keep the pattern unpredictable. Do not let them guess. The psychological impact showed. The Germans hesitated to move. They hugged the rubble with desperation. They spoke to each other with raised voices. Their officers shouted orders, but their formation lost cohesion. The machine gun team attempted a final push. They sprinted toward a truck husk for better cover. They reached the midpoint between the hotel and the truck. The vent on the 2nd floor opened on them. 3 controlled shots. Both men fell in the dust. The platoon broke again. Some ran toward the hotel. Some tried to retreat behind the church. Others scattered into side alleys. This time their retreat was disorderly. Their fear of unseen fire had reached its peak. Hale observed the street for 2 minutes after the last German disappeared. No movement followed. The hotel remained quiet. The alley remained empty. Only dust drifted. "Cease fire," Hale said. Miller lowered his rifle. He inspected the vents. All remained intact. Mortar lines held. None revealed damage that would compromise concealment. The building still looked like an ordinary civilian structure. Hale moved beside him. "This tactic saved the squad again," he said. "Command needs to know about this." Miller understood. The vents were simple. Any unit with basic tools could build them. They required no special training. Their effectiveness came from concealment and discipline. In urban combat, those qualities mattered more than heavy fortifications. Hale continued. "After the next wave we send a runner. This has to reach the captain." Miller nodded. "He will want proof." "You provided it," Hale said. "Twice." The squad began redistributing ammunition. They prepared for another assault. Reinforcements were still hours away. Their building, fortified with 8 hidden firing points, remained the only strong point controlling the street. Miller studied the hotel. He knew the enemy would regroup there. He knew they would attempt a new angle. They would not rely on the same approach 3 times. They would adjust. He needed to adjust too. Miller moved through the interior stairwell. He checked each level for structural weaknesses. Heavy machine gun fire earlier had shaken loose fragments of plaster and weakened one support beam. He inspected it closely. The damage was manageable. The building could endure another engagement. Reinforcement was necessary, but collapse was unlikely. He reached the 3rd floor and studied the angles again. The Germans had learned something from the last engagement. They avoided certain routes. They recognized the fatal paths. Their next assault would not repeat earlier mistakes. They would attempt to flank from the south, where visibility was low. They would also seek elevated positions to counter the 3rd floor vents. Miller walked to the south side of the building. This section faced an alley the Germans had not fully used. Rubble blocked most of the path, but narrow channels still allowed movement. He took note of a cracked pillar inside the wall. If the enemy approached from this angle, his squad needed a vent to cover the ground. He began marking the brick line for a new vent. He selected a brick where the mortar pattern aligned naturally with surrounding vents. He worked to match the spacing. The building's architecture varied slightly between levels. Civilian builders had added extensions at different times. This gave Miller more options. Hale approached. "You think they will move through the alley now?" Hale asked. "Yes," Miller said. "They will avoid the main street. They will assume we hold that approach. They will try a new angle." Hale studied the wall. "Can you shape another vent in time?" "I can finish it in 20 minutes, Miller said. "But we need someone watching the hotel during that time." Hale assigned 2 riflemen to the 3rd floor windows. They stayed back from the openings, avoiding silhouettes. They tracked movement with shadows and reflections. They kept quiet. They knew any exposed movement invited a marksman's bullet. Miller worked quickly. He removed the targeted brick and carved the cavity behind it. He shaped the hole with precision. The exterior appearance remained identical to the building's other vent lines. From the alley, no one would suspect a rifle pointed through it. He checked the angle. This vent covered the narrow path between a collapsed awning and a partially standing shop wall. Perfect. A soldier moving there would expose only a small part of his body, but the vent provided a clear shot. He reinforced the interior edge. He guided the assigned rifleman into position. "Stay still. Do not lean. Wait for the angle. Only fire when the target enters the lane." The rifleman nodded. Hale reassembled the squad for a quick briefing. He pointed to a rough map drawn in dust on the floor. "They will test our weaknesses now," he said. "They lost the street twice. They will use the hotel for suppressive fire. Their flank will come from the alley. They will try to force us to reveal our positions." Miller added one detail. "They will also send a scout first. He will look into every window. If he does not see barrels, he will assume we abandoned the structure." Hale understood. "Let him look. He finds nothing." At 1140 hours, the hotel stirred again. Shadows moved behind broken windows. 3 German riflemen set up on the 2nd floor. They aimed toward the top levels of the Allied position. They prepared to suppress, not attack. Their goal was to pin the squad while the flank approached. Hale positioned 2 riflemen near the upper vents. "Fire only when they expose themselves fully," he said. "We need to keep our advantage." The hotel marksmen fired first. Their rounds struck the facade. Their shots shattered small fragments of brick. They aimed at windows, not vents. They scanned for movement. The squad held still. Miller waited. He listened for the second noise. The one he expected. It came from the south alley. Boots on rubble. Slow, controlled steps. The enemy moved carefully. Their scout stayed against the wall, hoping to avoid detection. He approached the vent's firing lane in 3 steady movements. Miller tapped the rifleman's shoulder. A single shot cut through the alley. The scout dropped instantly. Hale signaled the rest of the squad. "Hold positions," he said. "Do not respond to their suppressive fire." The Germans in the hotel reacted aggressively. They fired at every window. Their tracer rounds sparked off broken walls. They attempted to overwhelm the squad into responding. They needed to locate the hidden firing points. The squad stayed silent. Miller listened again. More footsteps. A small unit of 6 advanced into the alley. Their formation was tight. Their spacing was minimal. They expected no hidden angle in a destroyed alley. They believed concealment protected them. The vent gave Miller a full view of their legs and torsos. He waited until the first soldier entered the center of the lane. Miller tapped again. The rifleman fired. The shot struck the leading soldier's hip. He collapsed. The next 2 halted, confused. They pressed against the wall. They tried to identify the direction of the fire. They failed. Hale signaled a second shot. The rifleman fired again. A second soldier fell. The remaining 4 retreated behind broken crates. They shouted to the hotel. Their communication revealed panic. They could not identify the firing source. They aimed toward the main structure, but no vent line drew their attention. The hotel machine guns shifted fire. They focused on the building's 3rd floor. Their rounds struck the facade repeatedly. The squad remained back from the windows. They did not respond. They did not risk exposure. Miller shifted to the next vent. This one covered the intersection where the alley met the main street. He saw 2 enemy riflemen moving to support the flank. They carried ammunition boxes. They meant to push toward the alley. He signaled again. 2 shots. 2 hits. The ammunition boxes dropped to the ground. Their carriers fell seconds later. The alley force broke. The survivors ran back toward the church courtyard. They abandoned their route entirely. Their voices carried fear. They spoke urgently. Their pace revealed desperation. The hotel teams realized the flank had collapsed. They reduced their suppressive fire. Their situation grew unstable. Their marksmen were dead. Their support teams were pinned. Their infantry was scattered. Hale saw the opportunity. He whispered to Miller. "Do we hit the hotel windows now?" "No," Miller said. "We wait for the next step." Hale trusted him. The squad remained still. The hotel grew quiet. Shadows inside shifted. A German officer approached the window. He scanned the building. He leaned forward, searching for any trace of a hidden shooter. He never saw the vents. The German officer studied the facade with deliberate care. His posture was rigid. He scanned systematically. He checked each damaged window. He checked the larger firing ports. He checked the shadows under broken roof beams. He did not check the vents. He saw them, but he dismissed them instantly because they blended with every other vent on the street. Miller watched him through the upper vent. The officer leaned slightly into the firing lane for only a moment. The angle was narrow. The distance was exact. The shot had to be perfect. Miller tapped the rifleman's shoulder. 1 round. The German officer snapped backward and vanished from the window. The squad did not cheer. They did not speak. They only shifted to new positions and reloaded. The building remained quiet. Dust settled from the suppressive fire. Shattered plaster scattered across the floor. A breeze passed through the damaged upper level. Miller listened for enemy movement. None came. Hale moved to Miller's side. He was their coordinator. "Their attack is compromised." Miller nodded. "They will attempt one more push. They cannot leave this block in our control." Hale agreed. "Their officers will force them forward. They have no choice." The squad prepared for the next engagement. They distributed ammunition evenly. They checked rifles. They adjusted positions within the vent network. The interior of the building now resembled a hidden fire control center. Every man had a designated lane. Every man had a restricted field of movement. The vents enforced discipline. Their narrow angles prevented wasteful fire. At 1320 hours, the third assault began. The enemy sent a larger force. Nearly 40 soldiers. Advanced from the hotel, the church courtyard, and the alley simultaneously. Their movement was coordinated. Their pace was controlled. Their formation was tighter than before. They carried extra ammunition and rifles. They had a new machine gun team. Their objective was clear. They intended to overwhelm the position and retake the block. Hale observed the approach. They committed everything, he said. Miller confirmed. This is their final attempt before they fall back to the inner district. The first enemy squad moved up the main street. Their spacing was wide. They kept to debris for cover. They fired bursts toward the building's windows. They attempted to maintain suppressive pressure. Their machine gun fired from behind a stone column. They aimed toward the second floor, assuming that is where the vents were located. They guessed wrong. Hale signaled the first shot from the third floor vent. The rifleman fired at the machine gun assistant. The round hit. The assistant dropped. The gunner panicked and dragged the weapon back behind the column. This reduced their suppressive fire. The second enemy squad emerged from the courtyard. They used the remains of a broken cart for partial protection. Their officer directed them toward the flank. They planned to reach the wall and breach the entrance. Miller shifted to the new vent he built earlier. It covered the path directly. He watched the first soldier move into the alley. He tapped his rifleman. One round. One fall. The squad behind him hesitated. They pressed against the wall. They tried to identify a muzzle flash. They searched shadows and windows. They found nothing. Their officer shouted an order for them to continue. They obeyed, but their pace slowed. The third enemy group advanced along the hotel's outer wall. They tried to approach under its shadow. They avoided the open street. They moved in single file. Miller tracked them through the vent on the first floor. He tapped. The rifleman fired. The lead soldier collapsed. The second soldier froze. He stared at the building trying to find the shooter. He fired several rounds blindly. The bullets struck plaster. The squad returned to cover. Hale whispered to the squad. Maintain discipline. Let them collapse under pressure. The Germans continued forward in disorganized waves. Their formation deteriorated. Their lines bent. They pushed into the same kill zones Miller designed. They reacted to losses with confusion. Their officers tried to force movement, but the squad's hidden angles punished every attempt. At 1,337 hours, the enemy reached their highest point. 3 soldiers sprinted toward a doorway at the base of the building, hoping to gain entry. They moved under heavy fire. Hale saw them through the corner vent. He gave the signal. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped. The third soldier reached the doorway and attempted to break it open. He succeeded in forcing it open by several centimeters. Miller moved to the nearest vent. He aligned his view. He tapped the rifleman. A single round struck the soldier through the upper shoulder. He fell onto the doorway. His body blocked it. The breach attempt failed. The squad continued firing from alternating vents. The pattern remained unpredictable. The enemy could not triangulate. Their numbers decreased steadily. Their surviving soldiers attempted to retreat to the hotel. They crawled, ran, stumbled. Some dropped their weapons. Some shouted for medics. Some tried to drag their wounded comrades. The hotel machine gun attempted to suppress again, but its gunner fell to a shot from the third floor vent. His weapon fell from the window. It struck the ground with a heavy thud. The machine gun team lost their support. The street became an open kill zone. Hale watched as the last organized German group attempted to regroup behind rubble. They had lost their command element. They had lost their machine guns. They had lost their opening routes. They had no clear strategy. Miller observed through the upper vents. They are pulling back, he said. Hale nodded. Then we end this wave. The squad delivered the final shots with precision. They did not fire unnecessarily. They fired only when a target presented itself. Within minutes, the street cleared again. No enemy movement remained. The hotel fell silent. The alley held no shadows. The squad ceased fire. The silence that followed felt heavy. Dust drifted in slow motion through the light. The building remained intact. The vents remained perfect. The squad survived the third assault without a single casualty. Hale looked at Miller. This tactic changes how we hold every building in this city. Miller replied quietly. It changes how any soldier fights in any city. Hale agreed. When reinforcements arrive, we send the full report. This needs to reach every platoon. Miller began reinforcing the vents again. He repaired minor interior cracks. He secured loose edges. He inspected the angles to ensure they remained consistent. The tactic depended on precision. Outside, the bodies of 3 waves of attackers lay scattered across the street, alley, and courtyard. The scale of the success was visible. The squad knew the enemy would not return soon. They had cut a platoon with 8 hidden holes. The building settled into a tense quiet. The squad stayed in position, rifles ready, eyes fixed on the street below. Smoke drifted from pockets of burning debris. Sunlight filtered through the dust in thin vertical lines. Every man waited for a fourth attack, but none came. The enemy had committed a platoon and lost it. Their command would not risk another push without artillery or armor. Both were hours away. Hale listened for movement. None reached his ears. He studied the hotel. Its windows stayed empty. No silhouettes crossed the broken frames. No shadows hinted at survivors. The entire street had gone still. He turned to Miller. "You held this block. You kept everyone alive." Miller did not respond immediately. He walked along the interior, checking each vent with slow and steady focus. He touched the mortar lines. He checked for cracks. He confirmed that every firing lane remained usable. Only after verifying the structure did he answer. "We held because they never saw us," Miller said. "They saw a building, not a fighting position." Hale understood the truth behind the words. The tactic worked because the squad disappeared into the architecture. They became part of the structure. The enemy fought a shape they could not understand. Hale called for the runner. A young private from the neighboring platoon arrived. His uniform carried dust from the courtyard. His breathing was heavy. He saluted quickly. "Sir, command is expecting an update." Hale handed him a folded report. "Move fast. This needs to reach the captain before he commits the next advance." The runner nodded and disappeared down the stairwell. His footsteps faded into the rubble outside. Miller returned to the third floor. He looked through the vent that had taken down the marksman. The view stretched to the hotel's second level. The street below showed the cost of the fighting. Helmets lay scattered. Weapons lay near bodies. Craters broke the pavement. Brick dust covered everything. Hale approached quietly. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Miller kept his eyes on the street. "Urban fighting exposes every mistake. Large openings are mistakes. Predictable positions are mistakes. These vents remove both." Hale nodded. "You think other units can use this?" "Yes," Miller said. "Any squad with a hammer and chisel can build one. The only requirement is discipline." Hale considered this. "Some commanders will resist. They trust the book." Miller answered calmly. "The book does not survive a city. Soldiers do." The conversation halted when footsteps echoed from the ground level. The squad raised rifles. Tension returned instantly. A voice called from outside. "Friendly. Do not fire." Hale signaled the squad to hold. 2 Allied scouts entered the building. Their uniforms were covered in dust. They carried binoculars and field pads. One of them held a note from the captain. He handed it to Hale. "Message for you. Reinforcements reached the east alley. The block is secure. Captain wants a full report. He heard your squad stopped 3 assaults." Hale took the note and read it. The captain had ordered a controlled push into the next street. He wanted Miller's vent technique documented and tested in another structure before nightfall. He folded the note. He faced Miller. "Command wants your method." Miller nodded. "We can teach it." The scouts looked around the interior. One of them approached the nearest vent. He put his eye close to the opening. He blinked in disbelief. "This is almost impossible to see from the outside," he said. "How did the Germans not catch this?" Miller replied in a calm voice. "They never looked for vents. They looked for barrels." The scouts studied the opening again. "You killed them through this," Miller confirmed. Each shot was a direct angle. No flash. No silhouette. The scouts shook their heads slowly. They had never seen anything like it. They took notes. They measured the vent width. They asked about construction time. Miller gave clear and direct answers. Within minutes, word spread through the Allied ranks. Squad leaders entered the building to study the vents. Engineers followed. They examined the mortar lines. They traced the firing lanes. They compared the vents to the standard ports. One engineer spoke quietly to Hale. "If we put these in every building along the next street, we can advance without losing half our men." Hale agreed. "That is the point." Miller moved through the structure with the engineers. He demonstrated how to select bricks. He showed them how to find ventilation spacing. He taught them the angle for interior carving. He showed how to avoid structural damage. Every step was practical. No detail was wasted. By mid-afternoon, 3 nearby buildings had newly built vents. Their squads prepared to hold the same way Miller's squad had held the block. They took positions behind the small openings. They memorized firing angles. They followed the method with precision. As the sun lowered, the captain himself arrived to inspect the site. His uniform carried the dust of the day's fighting. He walked the length of the interior. He examined each vent closely. He crouched to see the angles. He stood without speaking for several seconds. Then he asked Hale, "Who created this method?" Hale pointed to Miller. "Private Arthur Miller. Former bricklayer." He saw what the rest of us missed. The captain approached. "Miller, you found a solution that saved dozens of lives today." Miller kept his voice even. "The city forced the idea. Any building can hide a soldier if the opening is small enough." The captain spoke with careful clarity. "We are adopting this across the entire company. You will demonstrate the technique in the next structure. Your squad will not move until training is complete." Miller accepted the order. "Understood." The captain turned to Hale. "Hold this block. More units will rotate through here before nightfall. Your squad becomes the reference. Anything they build must match this standard." Hale acknowledged. The captain departed, leaving the squad with new responsibility. As night approached, the street fell silent. The third wave had broken the enemy's will to contest this block. Distant artillery echoed from the inner district. Allied units advanced. The front shifted forward by several hundred meters. Miller returned to the vent overlooking the hotel. He sat beside it for a quiet moment. The battle had pushed him to create something simple that changed everything. His pre-war skill had become a tactical tool. His understanding of brick patterns had saved lives. His innovation would spread through the city. Hale joined him. "Command will write your name in the report." Miller shook his head. "They will credit the squad. That is enough." Hale considered him for a moment. "Your vents cut a platoon today. No one will forget what happened here." Miller looked through the narrow opening one last time. The street below remained quiet. The hotel stood dark. The enemy had withdrawn. The vents had turned a fragile building into a hidden fortress.